Good evening, everyone. Today, I'd like to share some stories and the background of end-of-life care. I don't really know that much myself, but because the Dharma Masters at Gold Buddha Monastery wants me, Dharma Master Yong, to share something, so I'd just like to share what I know, so we can learn from one another. So before we start, let's recite Shakyamuni Buddha's name 3 times. Homage to our fundamental teacher, Shakyamuni Buddha. Homage to our fundamental teacher, Shakyamuni Buddha. Homage to our fundamental teacher, Shakyamuni Buddha. So more than a decade ago, I lived in Taiwan for a period, and because of various conditions, was able to receive chaplain training in the hospice ward of the National Taiwan University Hospital. And so this chaplain training is kind of like similar to the training of a nurse. Basically, for us monastics to be able to take care of patients in the hospice ward. So the hospice ward in Taiwan at that time, the requirements were that based on the doctor's evaluation, these patients could only live for up to 6 months. And so these are all patients with terminal illnesses who were close to the end of their lives. And so our work or our job was to talk with them and see how we could help them. And so every day I took care of around 3 to 5 terminal patients. And these 3 to 5 terminal patients weren't the same people every day, because these patients, they came and went pretty frequently. Some left the ward and went back home, while others, left the world or passed away. So today I'd like to share the stories of 3 patients that made a deep impression on me. And from their stories, perhaps we can understand what people face at the end of their lives, and then learn from their experiences. So when I went to do this training, I had the attitude of wanting to learn from these terminal patients and see how they experienced the end of their lives. And so I didn't really have much chance because there was a lot of things I didn't know at first. So the first patient I met, he was very well built. He was as strong as this man. Of course, it wasn't this patient in the picture, but this person was as built as this person, but he was much older. And when I saw him, he wasn't standing. He was already lying down. So he was lying down on the hospital bed. So when I saw him, I said, "Wow, you're so well built." And then guess what he said? He said, "It's useless." Now, why did he say that? I didn't know at that time. Some of you might have more wisdom and know why he said that, why he said it's useless. Because only by understanding his response would you be able to help him. So we need to understand why he said it's useless. And only then are you able to help him. So at that time, I didn't understand why he said it's useless. And so I couldn't really help him. Now, when we go to our small group discussions later, we can discuss this topic and think about, so we can think about it now, and then you can discuss it later in your small groups, in your breakout rooms. So next, I'd like to share some of the symptoms for death or the symptoms of dying. So there's this book called The Secrets of Life and Death. I'll share more about this book in a bit. But on page 176 of that book, there's a whole chapter that's describing kind of the symptoms of dying. So basically, when the disease progresses to a terminal stage, the body deteriorates to the point where multiple organs in the body start failing and specific signs begin to appear. These are called the symptoms of dying. And so this book, The Mysteries of Life and Death, there were two bhikshunis, two nuns in Taiwan, De Jiashi and Zong Chunshi. These two basically wrote this book along with others, and so it's around 300 pages long. So it's pretty interesting, and so I bought the book to read it. So it's not easy to purchase it in the US, but if you know how to use an ebook, it's available for purchase on Google Play. So these are some of the common symptoms. One is the gradual decline of the physical function. The body becomes frail, unable to walk, uncommunicative, has problems waking up, always feel drowsy, etc. And so, for example, that patient I was just talking about, you couldn't walk anymore. You had to lie on bed all day. And so they often like to sleep and have problems staying awake. Another symptom is hallucinations and restlessness. They might see their deceased relatives or past relatives. They might suddenly begin yelling and shouting, or they might wave both their hands in the air and the like. So these are all kind of hallucinations that these patients are having. And so we will talk about how Buddhism views this kind of symptom later on. Another symptom is appetite loss and swallowing problems. And so even though they don't eat much, but they won't feel hungry, they won't want to eat, and they easily choke on their food. They also have an unsteady breathing pattern, so their breathing becomes irregular, sometimes shallow, sometimes fast, gasping for air through the mouth, or they might be breathing intermittently and stopping for tens of seconds at a time. And so the last part, which is the stopping for tens of seconds, is kind of part of the later stage. So once they inhale and then exhale, you have to wait a period of time before they inhale again. Another symptom is called the death rattle. This is a very prominent sound. If you stay in kind of the hospital or these patient wards, you will hear the sound pretty often. It's different from regular breathing. And when this sound appears, the patient will pass away within a few days. And so the family will usually ask the nurse or the doctors to suck out the phlegm in the throat, but that's actually not the cause of the so-called death rattle. It's because the swallowing function declines, so saliva and other secretions accumulate in the throat, which produces this gurgling sound. Sucking out the phlegm doesn't actually help and could also cause bleeding. Another symptom is the drop of blood pressure. So the hands and feet will gradually turn cold. The tips of the finger and toes become bluish, or the skin will feel clammy and cold, and the pulse in the wrists will gradually weaken. These are all kind of natural symptoms that can be observed. There's also the decrease of urine or difficulty urinating. So urine become darker. They might only urinate once or twice a day, or even in severe conditions, they might not have trouble peeing or completely lose control of their bladder or bowels. And so as family members, how should we take care of them? Well, first of all, their consciousness might fade in and out, but hearing is the last sensory organ to disappear. This is also observed in Western medicine. And so as Buddhists, we also know that hearing is the last one to go. And so we can still talk to them, even though they might be sleeping, even though they might not react to what we're saying, they can still hear us. Or we can play recordings of their favorite Buddha recitation or recitation of Bodhisattvas' names, so they feel loved and cared for. So we should often chat with them, just as if they were still conscious or actively conscious and listening to us, because they can still hear us. The next part is hallucinations and restlessness. You can help them by holding their hand and telling them who you are, because they might have forgotten you. If they can still talk and talk about seeing a deceased family member, don't deny them. Just listen empathetically with them. Just because we can't see them, we should not deny that they are seeing those things. So later on, we'll look at what Buddhism says about this. There will also be appetite loss and difficulties with swallowing. And so food intake should not be forced at this point. Don't force the nurses or doctors to inject fluids or other nutrients into them, because their organs won't work as well anymore. And then if you inject all these nutrients, it'll be hard for them to process it. And as for the death rattle, when it appears, you can raise the head of the bed slightly or turn the patient on their side in order to soften the sound of their breathing. But this noise won't by itself affect the patient, and so you don't have to do this, but if it helps them, you can try. And so if you don't do it, it's also okay. This also will be poor peripheral circulation and the drop in blood pressure. So you can help the patient preserve their warmth by dipping their hands and feet in warm water, keeping them warm with blankets and socks, but avoid using electric blankets as they can overheat or even scald the patient. Patients may also feel anxious and terrified of death, because most people won't know what death is about. They don't know once the breath ends, what happens. And so when people don't know this, they're anxious and fearful. And so when that happened, I believe that love, comfort, and companionship is really important to have someone there with them through this process. Another thing is that with guidance from medical staff, family, friends may express their appreciation, apologize for their mistakes, bid farewell, and convey their love to the patient. So these are 4 different actions that you can do. And so if the patient is doing all right, they can also express, the patient themselves can express their appreciation, apologize for the mistakes, bid farewell to their family members as well. So when the patient goes into the hospice ward, if they're still in good condition, then we'll encourage them to do a life review. So for them to reflect on their entire lives from a young age to old age about things that they've experienced, happy and sad things, and to do this kind of life review. During this process, they often think of extremely enjoyable things, which will improve their spirits, because since they're in a hospice ward, they're already limited in the days left. So they often feel very dejected, as if it's the end of the world. But if you can have them review their times of glory in the past, it can help them perhaps even recover. Also, during this process of life review, if they think of people that they need to say thanks, say sorry, express their love, or say goodbye, do make sure to write those people's names down and the actions, and then to actually carry out the thanks, sorry, love, or goodbye to those people. So this is for people who are the patients who are still in relatively good condition. But for those who can't do that anymore, family and friends can also say thanks, say sorry, express love, and say goodbye to the patient. This is something that is very worthwhile for us to do. And so the homework for people today is to practice these 4 things: thanks, sorry, love, and goodbye. And so I'll go into more detail later. So next we'll see how Buddhism views hallucinations. So in the Earth Story Sutra, in the 8th chapter, Praises of Lord Yama, here is the sutra text. When those who do good in Jambudvipa are about to die, hundreds of thousands of ghosts and spirits from the lowly destiny transform themselves and appear as their parents or other relatives in an attempt to lead such people to fall into the lowly destinies. And so basically it's saying that when these people at the end of their lives, there will be many ghosts and spirits that come up from the lowly destinies. They'll come to these people and transform themselves into their parents or other relatives or friends. And they do this in an attempt to trick these people to also follow them into the lowly destinies. And so this is for people who have done good. So how much more is that the case for those who have done evil deeds? There will be even more of these ghosts and spirits who will try to do that. The sutra continues by saying, your relatives should make generous offerings, recite the sacred sutras, and recite the names of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Such good deeds for example, such as making offerings of 3 jewels, reciting the sutras, and reciting the names of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. So such good deeds can lead to deceased away from lowly destinies, and all the demons, ghosts, and spirits will withdraw and disperse. So this is a method described in the Store Sutra. And the Emperor Liang's repentance in chapter 35, which is a warning on impermanence, describes when dying, one suffers great agony and distress, surrounded by wailing and howling close relatives, whether by blood or marriage, one becomes terrified, knowing not where to go or who to rely on. When one's energy is spent, one's body becomes cold, and all the good or evil done throughout one's life unfolds before one's eyes. So it's saying that basically at the end of one's life, when one's about to die, all the good or evil that one has done will unfold before one's eyes. Like a movie will play back to them one by one. But those who have done good gain the assistance and protection of the devas, the gods and heavenly beings. Those who have done evil are herded and driven by ox-headed hell guardians. The ox-headed wardens and rakshasas are never lenient. And so that's describing Emperor Liang's repentance. And recently in Vancouver, there were some scientists, researchers, who recorded the brain activity of an 87-year-old as he died from a heart attack. And so the brainwaves indicated that there was rapid memory retrieval process that was occurring at the time of death. So this finding suggests that our life does flash before our eyes through this memory retrieval, just like what was described in Emperor Liang's repentance just now. In the compassionate water repentance, it basically says that the hell beings or does not wrongly punish people. And so for those who have forgotten about their offenses in their ordinary day-to-day life, at the end of their lives, where they have created evil, all of these things will appear before them. And so it's basically saying that if you've forgotten all the bad things you've done, at the end of your life, all those things will appear before you. So these debtors will ask them, you've created these offenses to me in the past, so how can you escape from them now? How can you, cover them over? And so this defender has nowhere to hide and nothing to hide. And so King Yama will basically scold them harshly and then send them to the hells. Basically, this is saying that everything that we've done throughout our lives will appear before us at the end of our lives. So in the book titled Thousand Hands and Thousand Eyes, the Venerable Master described how the hells have an offense reflecting mirror. So what's that? Everything you have done while alive is reflected in this mirror, just like scenes in a movie appearing one after another. So, for example, if you've murdered someone, if you've stolen from others, committed arson, or done any other bad things, they will all appear in that mirror. And so this is the so-called hallucinations described in kind of Western medicine or among ordinary people. So now I'd like to describe the second patient. Second patient after they reached the hospice ward, AC was blasting everywhere. It was very cold. And he also held a fan to blow on his face. And now when I went in, this patient asked me, Dharma Master, will I be reborn in the Pure Land? If you were me, how would you answer him? patient was, very worried, was afraid that they wouldn't be able to be reborn in the Pure Land. So they asked me whether I would be reborn in the Pure Land. And so how to answer them, that's a question, a good question. And so in order to answer that question, we can look at the Sutra on Contemplating the Buddha Infinite Life. So you might have gotten a review of the sutra a month ago. And so there are 9 grades. There are the upper grade, middle grade, and lower grade. Each grade also has 3 levels, upper, middle, and lower. And so I've kind of added grades in order to represent them. So the middle level of the middle grade, most people are familiar with. This is basically if you uphold the 8 abstinences for 1 day, 1 night, you can be reborn there. For those 4 on the lowest level of the middle grade, they are dutiful to, filial to their parents, do benevolent deeds for others, but they aren't a Buddhist. And at the end of their lives, they encounter good spiritual teachers, a good spiritual teacher who explains him the bliss of the land of Amitayas and then the 48 great vows of Bhikshu Dharmakara. Upon hearing this person passes away and then very immediately is reborn in the land of ultimate bliss. And now for the upper level of the lower grade, these people have already been committing various evil acts. They know no remorse, but then they also encounter this wise teacher who advises them to recite Amitabha Buddha's name. And because they recite the Buddha's name, they can eradicate 50 kotis of kalpas of birth and death. And so they can finally be reborn in the land of utmost happiness. As for the middle level of the lower grade, these are also kind of bad people. They've violated the precepts. But then again, when at the end of their lives, they may meet a good teacher who explains them the 10 supernal powers of Amitayas and other magnificent things. And when he hears this, then the birth and death for 80 kotis of kalpas is extinguished, and he is thus able to be reborn in the land of ultimate bliss. Now, the lower level, the lower grade, this is kind of a very bad person. They've committed the 5 heinous offenses, 10 evil acts. They should be fallen to the hells for a very long time. But they also encounter a good teacher who encourages them to recite the Buddha. They aren't able to be mindful of the Buddha, but they can tell them to physically recite the Buddha. And so if he can recite 10 times, he also can be reborn. And so the power of reciting Amitabha is very powerful. For the upper level of the lower grade, by reciting Amitabha's name, they can eradicate offenses resulting in 50 koti kalpas of birth and death. And then for the lower level of the lower grade, just by reciting in every breath, they can eradicate 80 kotis of kalpas. And so I've added kind of a chart to show the different grades. So A is the upper, B is the middle, C is the lower grade. And you can see that for the first 5 grades, it's all about vows and dedicating merit. The last 4 is encountering a Kalyana Mitra, or a good teacher. So these people are all non-Buddhists, or even if they are Buddhists, they are those who create evil or bad things within Buddhism. But despite the things they've done, they encounter a good teacher, a wise teacher, who gives them this opportunity to be reborn in the land of utmost happiness. And so encountering the instructions and teachings of a good spiritual teacher, from this we can see it's very important. And so by helping to recite for a dying patient, besides just reciting the Buddha's name, we should also teach them or give them some teaching and advice. This is also from the Restore Sutra in chapter 7, basically saying that if someone on the verge of death can hear the name of one Buddha, one Bodhisattva, one Pratyeka Buddha, they will attain liberation, whether they have committed offenses or not. And throughout 49 days, those whose lives have ended, who have not yet been reborn, they constantly hope that their immediate relatives will create blessings powerful enough to rescue them. I would like to finally describe this third patient. This patient was over 80 years old. He was an old gentleman. And when he came in, it was a few days before the Lunar New Year or the Spring Festival. And so we had many of these Buddha images, Buddha statues, and then we would give them to these patients. And so it's actually a Buddha image, and we would put them near the windowsill. So it was because during the Lunar New Year's, so we didn't go there, and I had already finished my training at that time, so I didn't go. But after the Lunar New Year, I went back, and then I received a call from the patient's daughter. And the patient's daughter exclaimed quite excitedly that her father was toothless, and his cheeks were sunken. But after they chanted Amitabha's name for him, his cheeks became full, just like the face of the Buddha picture you gave him. And his age spots were also gone too. So the daughter was confident that her father had been reborn in the land of ultimate bliss. She was very happy. So have you seen people who are so excited by their father's passing? Most people would think that this daughter was unfilial. This daughter was in fact very filial and a very devout Buddhist. But because she was quite certain that her father had been reborn in the land of utmost happiness, so she was happy on his behalf. And so in Buddhism, we don't usually talk about death. We talk about rebirth. So rebirth is basically being born somewhere else, going somewhere else to become a baby. So if we can go to a good place, such as the land of ultimate bliss, isn't that a cause for celebration? So being reborn is not necessarily something to grieve over. It's actually something that we can celebrate. Just like this third patient's daughter was happy for her father's passing. So this is something that we all should also be prepared for. And we can also allow these patients to understand that they have this opportunity, this hope to be reborn in the land of utmost happiness. And so this means that, passing away does not necessarily have to be something sad, but it can also be something to celebrate. So here are some other skills to improve your skills in end-of-life care, but I'll skip over them due to the constraint in time. The main points I want to point out is basically know and prepare ourselves mentally for the afterlife. Also to develop our wisdom, to increase our capacity to help patients and their families. Otherwise, we won't be able to help them. Just like at that time, I wasn't really able to help these patients. Like the first person, I couldn't tell him why he was useless. And then the third patient as well, also couldn't really help him. And so we really need to, apply effort and cultivate so that we have the wisdom to address these patients' concerns. So next we can go on to a group discussion. I have some groups share what they've learned. So for group E, they think that this strong person, in the past, he had very strong control over things. but now at the end of his life, he didn't feel or was willing to leave because he, clung to the Saha world and wanted to stay here, did not want to leave. So how to help him, how to, transform his dejection and clinging to the Saha world, these false thoughts, how to, put them to rest and transform them into a strength or a power to face his new life. So how to go about facing that new life? Basically, relying on his past power. His past power, he must have helped others, a lot of other people. And to basically teach him that everything is changing, everything is impermanent, and have him put down his love for the Saha world into an aspiration for the land of ultimate bliss. So we are no longer using our physical strength, but rather our mental fortitude to be mindful of the Buddha, to recite the Buddha's name. And this way, we can be reborn in the land of ultimate bliss. This will allow him a method of refuge towards Amitabha's Buddha. So this is the way we propose. So group F, our discussion results is that because this person was very strong originally, but now he's not that, he's kind of weak now. So as a good and wise teacher, we want to encourage him that regardless of whether physically you're strong or weak, you will have to pass one day. So we should focus on the afterlife. And so even though your body isn't as weak, but you're still healthy, your mind is clear. And so with this breath, we should seek rebirth and to tell them to recite the Buddha's name and be reborn in the land of utmost happiness. We also, in our group, talked about Grandmaster Yin Guang's method of basically encouraging him and teaching him and to allow them to give rise to pure faith so that they can be reborn. To allow them to make use of this opportunity at the end of their lives to practice. So our Master Yong says that, thinks that these answers were good understanding of the topic. I'd like to share the assignment for everyone today to go back and do a life review of yourself, and also to write down the names that you want to say thanks, say sorry, and express love to. And if you have an opportunity, then say thanks, say sorry, and express your love to these people. This is a kind of a short assignment to share with everyone, because this can also help yourself quite a bit to do this kind of life's review. If you owe someone something, you can say thanks to them. Or if you owe something to someone, you can say sorry. Or in this way, you can really kind of let go of things and be more carefree when it's time for you to go. So are there any questions about this assignment? So next, I'd like to share some references for people who want to learn some more. And so this is the mysteries of life and death that I just mentioned earlier. Another one is a kind of DVD that you can order online. It's not very expensive, about 15 US dollars. And Gold Buddha Monastery should receive a copy of this DVD soon. And you can also maybe go there and borrow the copy. But this describes 3 people at the end of their lives. It's a documentary. It's very long. It's about an hour and a half. And so if you're interested in this topic of kind of end of life, you can look at and go check this out. Another thing is that about a month ago, Dharma Master Dozia shared at the City of 10,000 Buddhas Sunday evening lecture series about the mystery of life and death. And so this video is on YouTube. There's 2 different links. The top one's for Chinese, the bottom one is for the English translation. And so if you haven't yet, you can go and take a look. Another one is a play about listening to the body. So when Master Zhejia was speaking, she shared about 7 minutes of this play. It's in total about 30-some minutes, about half an hour. And so if you want, you can also take a look at that. And now the past Sunday, there was a day-long conference or discussion about kind of these Buddhist chaplains and their cultivation in the hospital for 25 years. So both a past and future look. So the entire discussion or conference is on YouTube, as well as their slides that they used. It's also available for viewing. These are all things that people can refer to. And there's also Professor Chen Qingyu, who published this book on clinical Buddhism and hospice care. So this professor, he has done a lot towards advocating for Buddhist chaplains in kind of Taiwan hospices. And finally, there is this hospice care volunteers training program created by Master Dezia, Master Zongden. So this kind of course is for lay people. And so this is kind of their timeline for their courses. Starts with an online course in April, and then an in-person course in around June to July, and then finally internship in August. So if you're interested, you can go to the link at the bottom of the slide to register, and you will also learn a lot from their experience. So that's what I wanted to share today. So we can now dedicate merit.
愿以自功德庄严佛净土，上报四重门，下济三途苦。若有见闻者，悉发菩提心，见此一报身。同生极乐国。三问讯。 顶礼老和尚。阿弥陀佛。